The night shift in Mercy Harbour Medical Center moved at a low, deliberate pace, like a body conserving heat. The trauma bays were quiet for the moment. Monitors pulsed in steady rhythms. The fluorescent lights hummed, never quite silent, never loud enough to demand attention. Rain traced thin lines down the tall windows that overlooked the ambulance bay, blurring the sodium lights outside into pale smears. Nora Hale began her shift the same way she always did. She logged in, checked assignments, reviewed charts line by line, eyes steady, posture neutral. Her movements were economical. No wasted steps, no rushing. When she prepared medications, she read the labels twice, then a third time, fingers resting lightly on the vial as if listening through touch. She documented everything as she went. Clean entries, clear times, no notes to explain herself. She did not speak unless spoken to. The charge nurse, Linda, noticed this the way people notice furniture, only when they bump into it. "She's slow tonight," Linda said to the resident while scanning the board. Not quietly, not loudly, just enough to be heard. The resident glanced over. "She always is," he said. "Hands shake. Takes forever. Nights aren't the place to learn confidence." Nora stood 3 feet away, adjusting an IV line. Her hands trembled slightly as she secured the tape. She finished the task without correcting the angle of her shoulders or the tilt of her head. She did not look up. When she was done, she stepped aside and moved on to the next room. The tremor eased as soon as no one was watching. She checked vitals in room 14, then 16, then paused at the nurse's station to update a chart. Her eyes lifted briefly, not to the people, but to the space. She noted the camera dome above the hallway junction, the convex mirror near the medication room, the red pull alarm by the stairwell door. She didn't stare, just enough to confirm placement, just enough to remember. When a supply cart rolled past too quickly, she registered the sound of its wheels and the delay between turns. When the elevator chimed 2 halls away, she clocked the timing, doors opening, closing, silence returning. No one noticed her noticing. In room 9, a child sat upright in bed, knees pulled tight to her chest. The girl's breathing was shallow, uneven. Her eyes tracked the doorway, then the window, then back to the doorway. Nora entered without announcing herself. She pulled a chair close and sat, lowering herself to the child's level. "It's loud at night," Nora said softly. "Not reassuring, just factual." The girl nodded once. "Put your hand here," Nora said, placing 2 fingers lightly against the girl's forearm. "Feel your pulse." They sat like that for a moment. Then Nora began to breathe slowly, in through the nose, out through the mouth. She didn't tell the child to copy her, she just kept breathing. After a few cycles, the girl's shoulders dropped a fraction. Her pulse slowed under Nora's fingers. When Nora stood, the child was asleep. Outside the room, a nurse cut across the hall and reached for a medication tray. She glanced at the chart, then at the vial. "Close enough," she muttered, already moving to administer. Nora stepped in quietly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't say stop. She simply touched the tray and angled it back toward the light. The dosage label caught the glare. Wrong concentration. The other nurse frowned, annoyed, then corrected it without comment. She didn't thank Nora. She didn't apologize. She moved on. Nora washed her hands longer than required. She kept her sleeves down while she did it. Water ran over the fabric, darkening it. She didn't adjust them. Linda passed again. "You okay?" she asked, eyes on the board. "You look nervous." Nora nodded once. "Yes." That was all. She disliked the way authority moved here, the shortcuts, the public corrections, the way volume replaced certainty. She felt it each time someone spoke down to another person in scrubs. It settled low in her chest, tight and familiar. She let it sit there. She did not act on it. Conflict drew attention. Attention asked questions. At 2:11 a.m., she checked her watch. Plain face, no decoration. The second hand moved smoothly. She adjusted her breathing to match it. 4 in, 4 out, again. Thunder rolled somewhere distant. The rain thickened. The elevators stood quiet. Doors closed. Lights steady. The ward felt clean. Too clean. Like a held breath. Nora updated one last chart and stepped back from the station. She stood where she could see the hallway and the doors without appearing to watch them. Her shoulders were relaxed. Her hands were still. No one spoke to her. No one noticed her at all. The EMS radio cracked to life without warning, its volume set just a touch too high in the quiet of the nurses' station. Mercy Harbor, inbound, the dispatcher said. Single male, violent, non-compliant, possible psych, extremely large, no restraints. The word large hung longer than the rest. A few heads turned. Linda leaned back in her chair, unimpressed. Another drunk, she said. They always sound worse on the radio. Security glanced up from their phones. One of them shrugged. We'll handle it. The resident didn't look up from his screen. Bay 3, sedate on arrival. The radio stayed open. The paramedic's breathing came through next, controlled, fast, not panicked. Patient is bleeding, superficial lacerations, extremely strong, not responding to verbal commands, eyes scanning, hypervigilant. Nora was already moving. She didn't announce it. She didn't ask permission. She slid a supply cart 6 inches closer to the wall, widening the main corridor without making it obvious. She lifted a tray of sharps and relocated it to a closed cabinet, hands steady, motion small. She checked the sedation drawer and noted what was missing, what wasn't. Ketamine stocked, midazolam low. She closed it again. Linda noticed her this time. "You're not assigned intake," she said. Nora nodded. "I know." She kept working. The radio continued. Patient resisting transport, not intoxicated per breath. Pupils reactive. Breathing is controlled but rapid. Nora paused, just long enough to listen. Controlled but rapid, not gasping, not sloppy. She pictured it without trying to. The stance, the tension, the way a body holds itself when it expects impact. She shifted her weight, a subtle change. Her shoulders squared for half a second. The resident glanced up. "What are you doing?" Nora lowered her chin. Her shoulders softened again. "Just clearing space." He frowned. "Don't overthink it." She stepped back, hands at her sides. The security guards finally stood, stretching like men getting ready for something familiar. One adjusted his belt. "We good?" "Yeah," Linda said. "Just be ready." Nora moved toward the hallway that led to the ambulance bay, not directly, but along a side path. She counted rooms as she passed. Who could move? Who couldn't? Who had monitors that would alarm if touched? She nudged a rolling stool closer to the wall with her foot, careful not to let it scrape. The radio crackled again. Patient is verbalizing, not coherent, using tactical language. That made her stop. No one else reacted. "Tactical language?" the resident repeated, annoyed. "He's high." Nora looked at the radio, then at the hallway beyond it. She picked up the mic before she could stop herself. Her voice stayed level. "Mercy Harbor," she said. "Is he tracking individuals or objects?" The line went quiet. Linda stared at her. "What?" The paramedic answered slowly. "Individuals, doors, hands." The room felt different after that, smaller. The resident snapped, "That's enough. Nora, put the radio down." She did, immediately. No hesitation, no argument. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was flat, neutral. The resident shook his head. "We don't need commentary. We need compliance." Nora stepped back into the shadow of the medication room. She did not apologize again. Outside, rain hammered harder against the glass. The automatic doors at the bay slid open and closed once, then again. Sirens faded, then cut abruptly. Nora positioned herself where the light from the hallway broke unevenly, where reflections from the floor would distort movement. She leaned against the counter, head lowered, hands clasped loosely. Anyone looking would see nerves. A tremor returned to her fingers, small and convincing. Inside, she was counting. Distance from bay to triage, time to cross if unimpeded, where cover existed, where it didn't. She didn't plan an intervention, not yet. She planned margins. Linda passed again. "You okay?" she asked, distracted. "Yes," Nora said. The radio chirped one last time. "Arriving now." Nora closed her eyes for a single breath. In through the nose, out through the mouth. 4 counts. She felt the familiar tightening release just enough. When she opened them, the sliding doors at the end of the hall began to move. She stayed where she was, not in the way, not out of reach. The ward held its breath. The sliding doors at the ambulance bay opened too hard. They didn't glide the way they were supposed to. They slammed outward, hitting their stops with a crack that cut through the ER. Rain blew in with the cold. The sound echoed down the corridor, sharp enough to make heads turn before anyone had time to react. The man came through on foot. He was enormous. Well over 6 feet, shoulders filling the doorway, posture bent only enough to clear the frame. Blood streaked down one side of his face, dark against his skin, dripping from a cut near his hairline. His jacket hung open, soaked and torn. His hands were empty, but they were clenched like he was gripping something invisible. No restraints, no gurney, no wheelchair. For half a second the room stalled, not panic yet, just disbelief. Then he took 2 steps forward, eyes moving fast, not wild, not unfocused, scanning. Nora saw it immediately. The way his weight stayed centered, the way his head turned before his shoulders, the way his breathing stayed fast but controlled, chest rising evenly despite the chaos. He wasn't looking for an exit. He was checking threats. Security rushed him. They moved like they always did, straight in, voices raised, hands out. One reached for the man's arm, the other tried to block his path. The giant reacted without thinking. He pivoted and drove his shoulder into the first guard's chest, lifting him clean off his feet. The second guard went down when the man hooked an arm and twisted, using momentum, not strength. It was fast, efficient, frightening in how little effort it took. The guard hit the floor hard and didn't get back up. Someone screamed. Patients scattered. One woman stumbled trying to get out of a wheelchair. A nurse tripped backward and hit the counter, her head snapping sideways. A supply cart tipped and spilled across the floor, metal clanging, plastic skidding. The giant roared. Not words, a sound pulled from somewhere deep, raw and broken. "Sedate him!" the resident shouted. "Now!" A nurse grabbed a syringe, hands shaking. She moved too close, eyes locked on the needle instead of the man. The giant turned toward her, reflexive, his arm coming up. Nora was already moving. She didn't run toward him. She moved away from him, angling toward room 12. A child sat frozen in the bed, eyes wide, mouth open but silent. Nora reached the bed, unlocked the wheels, and rolled it back in one smooth motion, tucking it behind the heavy doorframe where the wall jutted out. "Stay here," she said quietly, already placing her body between the child and the open space. She crouched, one knee down, one foot planted, making herself smaller, shielding without touching. The man charged forward another step, then stopped short, chest heaving. His eyes darted again, catching movement, light, sound. He wasn't chasing, he was reacting. "Back up!" someone yelled. The nurse with the syringe hesitated. Too close, no clear angle, no plan. Nora saw the danger in the way the man's muscles coiled, the way his jaw tightened. The giant's stance shifted, feet staggered, knees bent, not sloppy, not drunk, trained. Nora felt it settle into her bones with cold certainty. This wasn't chaos, it was a trigger. He flinched at a monitor alarm, spun toward it. A doctor backed into a wall, hands raised, voice cracking. The giant's focus narrowed, locking onto him. Something about the white coat, the tone, The authority. The IV pole clattered as the man's hand brushed it. He grabbed it instinctively, lifting it halfway before stopping, breathing hard, fighting something no one else could see. Nora watched his breathing change. Shorter, faster. She watched his eyes lose the room and fix on something else entirely. She stayed where she was, head lowered, shoulders rounded, hands visible and shaking just enough. Background. The resident shouted again, louder now. "Someone do something!" Nora didn't look at him. She looked at the giant's feet, the spacing, the balance. She saw the way his fingers flexed, not gripping the pole yet, but ready. She saw the way his jaw worked, teeth grinding, not intoxicated, not psychotic, triggered, flooded, dangerous in a very specific way. A security guard groaned on the floor. Blood spread from his forehead. No one moved to help him. Nora adjusted her position by inches, keeping the wall at her back, the child fully covered. She kept her breathing slow, even as her pulse picked up. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The giant took another step forward. Everything in the ER leaned toward collapse. Nora stayed small, and she waited. The IV pole came up fast. The giant's hand closed around the metal shaft and lifted it overhead with a single motion, muscles in his forearm standing out under skin smeared with blood. The pole shook once, not from weakness but from restraint barely holding. The hook at the top rattled softly, an almost polite sound compared to the damage it could do. His eyes locked onto the resident. White coat, raised voice, hands half extended in a gesture that meant nothing now. "Hey, hey, just put it down," the resident said, backing up a step. His heel caught on spilled supplies. He didn't notice. Nora did. She moved before anyone told her to, not quickly, not dramatically. She stepped out from the edge of the room, hands open and empty, palms angled slightly inward. Her body stayed turned, not squared up, one shoulder back. She kept distance without retreating, placing herself between the man and the doctor without making it obvious. Her voice cut through the noise without rising. "Sir," she said, low, even, "you're safe right now." The word safe landed gently, not a promise, a reference point. The giant's grip tightened. The pole dipped a fraction, then steadied. His breathing was still fast, but it shifted, less ragged, more measured. His eyes flicked to her hands, then to her face. She didn't stare him down. She looked just past him, as if giving him space to exist. "You're inside a medical facility," Nora continued. "No one here is trying to hurt you." The resident opened his mouth. Nora lifted one finger, not at him, but low, near her own thigh. A small motion, a boundary. The resident froze, confused. The giant's shoulders rose and fell hard. The IV pole wavered again. Nora took one step closer, just one. "You've been moving all night," she said. "Your body thinks it's still out there." She didn't say combat. She didn't say mission. She let his mind fill the space. "You don't have to solve anything right now," she said. "You can let the pole rest." The giant swallowed. His jaw clenched. Sweat ran down the side of his face, cutting clean lines through blood. She watched his breathing carefully, counted it. Fast in, fast out. "Easy," she said. "Slow it down with me." She demonstrated without calling attention to it. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Her chest barely moved. He didn't copy her, not yet. "You're doing the right thing by holding," she added. "Control matters." That got through. His grip shifted. The IV pole lowered an inch. Nora made her next choice carefully. "Sergeant," she said. Not loud, not confident, just precise. The word hit the room like a dropped instrument. The giant stiffened. His eyes snapped fully to her now, searching, testing. His breathing hitched, then slowed again, just a fraction. No one else spoke. For a few seconds, the ER held completely still. Monitors beeped, water dripped from the floor. Somewhere a child cried softly and was hushed. "You're not in trouble," Nora said. "You're overwhelmed. That happens. She didn't say to people like you. She didn't say, "I know." She stayed where she was, hands open, body angled, weight balanced enough to move if she had to. The IV pole lowered another inch. The resident exhaled sharply, relief leaking into his posture. He took a step forward without thinking. A siren wailed outside, loud, close, sudden. The sound sliced through the fragile calm like a blade. The giant flinched violently. His head snapped toward the sound, pupils blowing wide. The breathing Nora had slowed surged again, faster, louder. The IV pole came back up, higher this time. "Everyone get back!" someone yelled. The giant roared again, pure panic now, and lunged forward. The doctor was directly in his path. Nora had half a second. She could step aside and let security rush in again, hoping numbers would slow him, hoping no one took the pole full force, hoping the syringe didn't miss, hoping the doctor survived the first blow. Or she stepped in. Her hands closed on the pole below his grip, not yanking, not fighting strength with strength. She redirected the angle, twisting her body as she moved, pulling the weapon offline just enough that it smashed into a counter instead of a skull. Metal screamed. The impact jarred up her arms, rattling bone and muscle. Pain flashed white, sharp and immediate. She didn't let go. Gasps rippled through the room. Nora shifted her stance, closing distance fast now, her shoulder sliding under his forearm, her weight dropping. She felt the full mass of him for the first time, dense, powerful, uncontrolled. There was no pretending anymore. She drove forward, using leverage, not force, forcing his balance back while keeping the pole trapped against the counter. Her foot hooked behind his ankle, her elbow pressed into a precise point beneath his arm. The giant staggered. Shock crossed his face. Nora's breathing stayed steady. The choice had been made. Whatever came next, everyone in the room would see exactly what she could do. The giant recovered faster than anyone expected. His grip shifted on the IV pole, abandoning it mid-struggle, and his free hand closed around Nora's upper arm with crushing force. Fingers locked, tendons bunched. The strength behind it was not frantic, it was decisive, the kind meant to end a threat quickly. The pressure was immediate and absolute. Nora felt it compress muscle and nerve in one brutal instant. Pain flared hot and sharp, radiating down her arm. The room tilted as her balance threatened to go. If he pulled her in, if he wrapped the second arm, someone screamed her name. Nora didn't pull back. She stepped forward. It was a small movement, counterintuitive, but it changed everything. By closing the distance, she took away the reach of his strength. Her shoulder slid under his forearm, her body turning sideways to reduce the force bearing down on her. Her free hand came up fast. She struck once, not a punch, not a blow meant to punish. Two fingers pressed sharply into a narrow point just above the elbow joint, a precise angle where nerve met bone. She felt the immediate response in his grip, a reflexive release, involuntary, like a circuit breaking. His hand loosened. Nora didn't wait. She rotated her hips and guided his arm across her own body, using his momentum instead of fighting it. Her foot stepped behind his, heel hooking the ankle. She didn't shove. She shifted weight and let gravity finish the work. The giant stumbled forward, off balance now, surprise flashing across his face. Nora stayed close. She slipped behind him as he staggered, her forearm sliding across his upper chest, not his throat yet. She anchored her stance, knees bent, center low. Her other hand secured her grip, careful to avoid crushing the airway. She counted her breathing without thinking. In for 4, out for 6. He tried to fight it. His elbows flared, his weight surged, raw power returning as instinct took over. He slammed backward, pinning her briefly against the counter. Pain jolted through her spine. Her teeth clicked together hard enough to sting. She adjusted. Her arm slid higher. Her wrist turned just enough. Pressure shifted from muscle to artery, not crushing, not panicked, precise. The effect was immediate. His resistance changed, movements losing coordination, strength bleeding away without warning. His breathing stuttered, then slowed. Nora stayed steady, her face close to his shoulder, her voice low but firm. Easy, she said, not to command, to pace. The giant sagged. She eased him down with care, guiding his weight to the floor so his head didn't strike. She released the hold the moment he went limp, rolling him onto his side in one smooth motion. Silence rippled outward. Nora knelt beside him without hesitation. Her hands moved with familiar certainty, checking pulse at the neck, then the wrist. Strong, regular. She tilted his head gently, ensuring the airway stayed open, watching his chest rise and fall. She leaned close, eyes scanning his pupils, noting their response to light. "Get oxygen," she said, finally raising her voice just enough to be heard. "And a monitor." No one moved at first. Then the resident blinked, startled out of paralysis, and barked orders. A nurse rushed forward with equipment. Security hovered uselessly at a distance, unsure whether to approach or stay back. Nora adjusted the giant's position, sliding a folded blanket under his head. She wiped blood from his face with gauze, careful, methodical. Her hands didn't shake anymore. They were steady in a way that left no room for doubt. She checked his breathing again, then pressed gently on his shoulder, assessing tone. He remained unconscious, subdued, not injured beyond what he'd arrived with. Nora sat back on her heels and exhaled slowly. The room stared at her. Linda's mouth was slightly open. The resident looked from the giant to Nora and back again, confusion and something else flickering behind his eyes. No one spoke. No one congratulated her. No one accused her yet. For one suspended minute, the labels they had given her, slow, shaky, weak, no longer fit. Nora peeled her hands away from the man and stood, stepping back into her usual posture. Shoulders softening, head lowering slightly. The tremor returned to her fingers, faint but visible. She let it. "Keep him monitored," she said quietly. "He's stable." Then she moved aside, making space, becoming background again as the ER slowly found its voice. But something fundamental had shifted, and everyone in the room felt it. The resident found his voice first. "What she did was assault," he said, loud enough for the words to carry. He pointed at Nora as if distance might protect him. "That restraint was unsafe, unauthorized. We have protocols." Nora stood a step back from the trauma bay, hands folded loosely in front of her. Her shoulders had softened again, chin slightly lowered. The tremor had returned to her fingers, faint but visible. "She could have killed him," the resident continued. "I want this documented. I'm calling administration." He already had his phone out. Nora didn't respond. Linda looked between them, uncertainty tightening her expression. "He was attacking—" "That doesn't matter," the resident snapped. "We are not trained to do whatever that was." Nora said nothing. She didn't defend herself. She didn't correct his language. She let the accusation settle where it fell. Behind them, the monitors changed tone. A sharp, irregular alarm cut through the noise of the ER. The giant's heart rhythm stuttered on the screen, peaks and valleys misaligning, the steady line slipping into something dangerous. "Seizure!" a nurse called out. "He's seizing!" Nora was already moving. She stepped back into the bay, posture changing just enough to matter. She reached the bed and checked the airway first, turning the man's head to prevent obstruction. Her fingers brushed his jaw, precise, familiar. "Time it," she said quietly. The resident hesitated, caught between outrage and reflex. "We need—" "Magnesium," Nora said. "Now," and oxygen flow increased. "That's not—" "His rhythm is unstable," she continued, voice still level. "If it drops further, he won't come back on his own." The seizure intensified. The giant's body arched, muscles locking, then jerking. Foam edged his lips. The monitor screamed. Linda moved without thinking, grabbing the medication. Another nurse adjusted the oxygen. The room shifted from accusation to urgency in seconds. Nora's hands stayed steady as she administered care, eyes flicking between the man's face and the monitor. She adjusted the bed angle by inches, just enough to improve airflow. She counted under her breath, not audible, not for anyone else. The seizure broke. The rhythm smoothed, not fully normal, but no longer catastrophic. Nora stepped back, letting others take over. The tremor returned again, right on cue. The resident stared at the monitor, then at Nora. His jaw worked. "This doesn't change anything," he said. "I'm reporting this." He turned to the security desk. "Pull the footage." The cameras had caught everything. On the screen, Nora's movements played back in clinical clarity. The step forward instead of back, the precise strike, the controlled positioning, the restraint applied with a level of care that was unmistakable. It didn't look accidental, it looked trained. A murmur moved through the nurses. "That's not nursing school," someone whispered. Security shifted uncomfortably. One of them glanced at Nora, then away. Sirens sounded again, this time outside, closer. Police entered through the ambulance bay, their presence immediately changing the air. 2 officers approached the desk, while another stood back, observing. "We need to ask some questions," one said. They started with Nora. She answered simply, "Yes, I was on duty. Yes, I restrained him. No, I did not strike him beyond what was necessary. Yes, I monitored him immediately after." No embellishment, no justification, no emotion. The officer studied her. "Where did you learn to do that?" Nora met his eyes briefly, then looked down again. "Basic medical training." It was not a lie. It just wasn't complete. The officer nodded slowly, unconvinced but professional. "We'll need statements from everyone." The resident watched, arms crossed, expression tight with something like vindication. Nora felt the familiar pressure building behind her ribs. Not fear, not panic. Choice. She could explain. She could give names, dates, credentials. She could dismantle the accusation with a few carefully chosen facts, and in doing so, she would reopen a door she had spent years closing. She stayed quiet. When the officers moved on, Nora returned to the edge of the room, back into shadow. The giant lay sedated now, stable but fragile, machines breathing for him. Linda approached, voice low. "You okay?" Nora nodded. "He needs continuous monitoring for the next hour." Linda hesitated. "About what he said?" "It's fine," Nora replied. "It wasn't forgiveness. It was containment." The ER buzzed with speculation now, glances thrown her way, conversations stopping when she passed. Nora felt it and kept her pace unchanged. She had chosen silence before. She chose it again. And for the first time, it cost her something real. The giant stirred just before 3:40 a.m. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden thrashing, no alarms at first, just a shallow inhale that turned uneven, then a low sound from his throat that didn't match pain or confusion. Fear. Nora noticed before the monitor did. She was at the bedside adjusting the IV when his eyes opened. Not fully, just enough to see light and shadow. His pupils tracked the ceiling, then the corner of the room, then the doorway. His breathing accelerated in short, controlled bursts. Too controlled. "Easy," Nora said quietly, not leaning in, not touching him yet. "You're safe right now." His lips moved, dry, cracked. "They're here," he whispered. The words were almost lost under the oxygen hiss. Nora angled closer, blocking his line of sight to the door with her shoulder. She kept her voice level, steady enough to anchor to. "Who's here?" His eyes flicked to hers. For a second, the giant was gone. In his place was someone cornered. "Men," he said. "They follow. They don't wear it, but they move like it." His jaw tightened. His hands twitched against the restraints, not struggling, just testing. "Don't let them take me." This wasn't psychosis. Nora had seen psychosis. Disorganized thought, fragmented fear. This was different. This was structured, tactical. The fear had edges. "Where were you when you got hurt?" she asked softly. "Garage," he breathed. "Lower level. I saw the reflection before the pain." Nora felt it settle in her chest. Someone outside the room laughed. Normal ER noise. Too normal. Then the overhead speakers clicked once. "Attention all staff," a calm voice announced. "Mercy Harbor is initiating a temporary internal lockdown. Please remain in your assigned areas." Several heads turned. The resident looked up sharply. "What?" Security moved toward the doors. Phones came out. Nora didn't move. She watched the man on the bed instead. His breathing spiked. "They're close," he said. "They always move when it's quiet." Linda leaned toward Nora. "What's going on?" Before Nora could answer, the charge nurse called out from the desk. "We've got vehicles outside, black SUVs, no markings." The resident exhaled in relief. "Good. Someone's finally taking control of this." The phone rang at the desk. Linda answered, listened, then frowned. "They're asking for the patient." "What patient?" the resident asked. Linda covered the receiver. "They used a name, not the one on the chart." The resident straightened. "Put them through to me." He took the phone, nodding as he listened. Yes, we have him. He's sedated. We can release him as soon as—" Nora stepped closer. "Doctor," she said quietly. He waved her off. "This is Federal, above us." "Yes," Nora replied. "That's why you should wait." He turned on her. "You don't get to—" "He's unstable," she said, still calm. "Cardiac event less than an hour ago. Active neurological symptoms. If you move him now, you risk arresting him en route." The resident hesitated, phone still to his ear. "Medical necessity," Nora continued. "You want this clean, you document observation. Minimum window, 45 minutes. The voice on the phone spoke again, sharper now. The resident's expression changed. "They're insisting," he said. "They say delay isn't an option." Nora looked at the man on the bed. He was shaking now, small tremors running through muscle too large to hide them. His eyes stayed locked on the doorway. "Doctor," Nora said lower, "if they take him like this, he won't survive transport." "That's not our problem," the resident snapped. "This ER is not equipped to deal with whatever this is." Nora felt the line appear. Not rage, not defiance, a boundary. She stepped between the bed and the door, not blocking, just occupying space. "It is our problem," she said, "until he leaves alive." The resident stared at her. "Are you threatening me?" "No," Nora said. "I'm documenting." She reached for the chart, flipped it open and began writing. Times, observations, medical language precise enough to slow anything down. Outside the glass, shapes moved past the frosted windows, dark silhouettes, efficient. The man on the bed grabbed Nora's sleeve with surprising strength, not violent, desperate. "Please," he whispered. Nora covered his hand with hers, firm but gentle. "I won't let them rush this," she said. "Breathe with me." She set the pace. In, out, slow. The resident cursed under his breath into the phone. "We need more time." There was a pause, long enough to feel like pressure. Nora didn't look at the door. She stayed with the patient. She wasn't fighting anyone. She was buying time. And she knew, with a certainty that had nothing to do with fear, that if she failed here, if she let protocol bend too far, this man would disappear, not transferred, erased. So she held the line the only way she ever did, quietly, clinically, and without stepping back. The sound came before the lights. A low, rhythmic thump pressed through the walls of the ER, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. It vibrated the ceiling tiles. The glass in the trauma bay windows rattled in their frames. Rotor wash. Several staff looked up at the same time. "That's not news," someone muttered. The sound deepened, steadier now, closer. Whatever it wasn't circling. It was committing. Nora felt it in her chest before she heard it clearly. The tempo, the weight, a helicopter landing close, not hovering for clearance, not waiting for coordination. She checked the patient's monitor without being asked. Heart rate elevated but stable. Oxygen holding, pupils reactive. Good. For now. The resident moved to the desk phone. "That's probably them." "Who?" a nurse asked. Federal, he said. He didn't sound relieved anymore. The overhead doors at the ambulance bay slid open. Cold air rushed in, carrying rain and the smell of fuel. Through the glass, figures moved with purpose, dark jackets, no visible insignia, hoods down despite the weather. They didn't run. They didn't hesitate. A small team, 4 of them, entered the ER in a loose diamond. No shouting, no weapons raised, but their hands stayed close to their sides, their spacing precise. The lead stopped at the desk. We're here for the patient from the earlier disturbance, he said, calm voice, flat. We'll take custody now. The charge nurse blinked. We need paperwork. The man didn't argue. He simply looked past her. And we need to speak to the nurse who restrained him. The room shifted. Eyes turned, not all at once, one by one. Someone said Nora's name, too loud. Hospital administration appeared from nowhere, badges swinging, faces tight with forced authority. There's been a misunderstanding, one of them said quickly. The nurse acted independently, against protocol. Nora stayed at the bedside. She adjusted the IV flow by a fraction. Watched the waveform. The lead stepped closer, eyes scanning until they landed on her. For a moment, nothing moved. Then his posture changed, just slightly, shoulders easing, not respect, recognition. He nodded once, almost imperceptible. Nora returned it without lifting her chin. That was all. Administration didn't notice. They were talking over each other now. She assaulted a patient. We're conducting an internal review. She's new, not fully trained. The lead raised a hand. Silence fell. She restrained him correctly, he said, and she kept him alive. He turned his attention back to Nora. Status. Stable for now, Nora said, but not transport ready. The administrator scoffed. That's not her call. It is, Nora replied. Not louder, just final. He's post-event. Any extraction without proper sedation and monitoring risks arrhythmia or airway collapse. The lead studied her for a second longer. Then he nodded again. Patient is a protected witness, he said, addressing the room now. Classified trauma subject. Extraction goes wrong. This becomes a fatality with consequences none of you want. The resident swallowed. Witness to what? The lead didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer to the bed. The patient stirred, eyes fluttering. Easy, Nora murmured, adjusting oxygen. You're still here. The patient's gaze drifted toward the figures. Fear spiked. Nora shifted, blocking his view again. Not yet, she said quietly. You're staying with us a little longer. The lead watched her do it, watched the patient's breathing slow. He exhaled through his nose. We were told you might be difficult. Nora didn't look up. You were told wrong. One of the team members leaned in. We're on a clock. So is he, Nora replied, and his runs faster. The administrator stepped in again. We can't hold federal assets. You can, the lead said, and you will. Because if you don't, the medical examiner gets involved, and this stops being clean. He turned back to Nora. What do you need? Nora finally looked at him. 10 minutes, she said. Monitoring uninterrupted. Transport prep done here, not in the hallway. No lights, no rushing. The lead considered, then nodded. 10 minutes. Administration opened their mouth to protest. The lead cut them off without raising his voice. If this goes bad, it's on me. That ended it. The team stepped back, forming a quiet perimeter. Not aggressive, protective. Nora adjusted the patient's restraints, checked his pupils again, ran a hand over his forearm, grounding pressure. You're not being taken like that, she said softly. Not tonight. The patient nodded weakly. Behind her, whispers spread. Confusion, fear, a dawning realization that something much larger than hospital politics had walked through their doors. Nora ignored it all. She focused on the monitor, the airway, the math of time and oxygen and heart rhythm. She didn't ask who they were. She didn't ask what he had seen. She didn't ask what this would cost her. She did what she had always done. Stabilize first. Survive the moment. Let the rest wait. The first shot was never fired. That was the mistake. The man stood half a step behind the team lead, close enough to be mistaken for support, far enough to act independently. He wore the same dark jacket, the same calm face, but his eyes never stopped moving, not scanning for threats, scanning for advantage. Nora saw it when he shifted his weight. He moved against the flow, not protective, possessive. "Let's move," he said, voice sharp. "Now!" The lead didn't answer right away. Nora felt the change ripple through the room before it showed on anyone's face. A tightening, a wrongness. "We agreed to 10 minutes, the lead said. "We don't have 10, the man replied. His hand drifted inside his jacket. Not dramatic, efficient. That was enough. Nora stepped closer to the bed, her body becoming a barrier again. She didn't raise her voice. "Everyone back," she said to the nurses nearby. "Now!" They moved, instinctively. Later they wouldn't remember why they listened, only that they did. The man behind the lead smiled thinly. "You don't get to—" The lights cut out, not completely. Emergency power snapped on, bathing the ER in red and amber. Alarms began to chirp, doors cycling, smoke dampers closing. Nora had already reached for the wall panel. Her elbow hit the fire door release as she pivoted, sealing half the bay behind reinforced glass. Controlled chaos. The man cursed and stepped forward. The lead spun, reaching for him too late. Nora grabbed a canister from the crash cart as she moved. Not a weapon, a medical oxygen tank. She cracked the valve just enough to hiss, then rolled it hard across the wet floor. It slammed into the man's shin. He stumbled. Nora didn't hesitate. She crossed the distance in 2 steps, used the cart as cover as something metallic flashed in his hand. Not a gun raised. A threat implied. She slammed the defibrillator cart sideways, pinning his arm against the wall. The metal rang out, loud and disorienting. He swung blindly. The blow caught her shoulder, hard enough to drive the air from her lungs. Pain flared, white-hot. Old memory tried to surface with it. She forced it down. She drove her forearm into the soft tissue under his jaw, not striking, just compressing. His grip loosened. She twisted, stepped through, and wrenched the object from his hand. It clattered across the floor. The lead shouted her name. Nora ignored it. She grabbed the man's wrist, rotated it until his balance broke, and shoved him backward into the open smoke door. Steam poured in as the fire suppression system fully engaged. The man slipped on the slick floor. Nora went down with him, controlled, her knee planting against his ribs. He gasped. Her vision tunneled for a second. Pain pulsed through her shoulder, down her arm. She adjusted her position, found his carotid with her forearm, and applied pressure. Not enough to kill, enough to end the fight. "Stand down," she said quietly, close to his ear. "This is over." He struggled once, then twice, then he stopped. Nora held the restraint until she felt the change. Muscles slackening, consciousness fading. She rolled him onto his side and released. Behind her, the lead was already shouting orders. Legitimate authority moving fast now. The rest of the team converged, weapons still low but ready. "Cuff him," the lead said. "Now." 2 of them complied, efficient and silent. Nora staggered to her feet. The room swayed. She caught herself on the bed rail, breath shallow, jaw clenched. The patient was still there, still breathing. She checked the monitor with shaking fingers that steadied as soon as they touched the screen. Heart rate elevated but holding. Oxygen saturation acceptable. "Prep transport," she said. "Now it's time." No one argued. They moved the patient carefully, restraints checked twice, sedation adjusted. A stretcher rolled in, smooth and quiet. Nora walked alongside until the doorway, then stopped. The lead met her there. "You're hurt," he said. "I'm fine," she replied. "Not true." "Enough." He nodded once. "We've got it from here." She watched them go. watched the patient disappear down the corridor under escort that finally made sense. Only then did her legs give out. She sank onto a chair against the wall, head back, eyes closed. The adrenaline drained fast, leaving cold and ache in its wake. The ER filled again with sound, radios, commands, fire crews, police. Someone knelt in front of her, a medic she didn't recognize. "You need to be checked," he said. "In a minute," Nora replied. Across the room, the corrupt man was being lifted, restrained, alive. No speeches, no accusations shouted, just containment. Nora opened her eyes and watched until he was gone too. Then she let herself breathe. The hardest part was over, not because she had won, but because no one else had died. Dawn crept in without ceremony. The rain slowed first, thinning to a mist that streaked the ambulance bay windows. Pale light followed, seeping into the ER through high glass panels smeared with smoke residue. The night had burned itself out, leaving behind the quiet damage of survival. The trauma bay looked like a place that had held its breath too long. A shattered monitor hung dark on the wall. Water pooled across the floor, carrying the faint smell of disinfectant and something metallic beneath it. Gurneys sat abandoned, where people had fled and returned again. The patient was gone. No announcement marked his departure, no stretcher rolling through the main hall. He had been moved through a side corridor under controlled silence, escorted by people who knew how to disappear when necessary. Staff gathered in small clusters now, voices low. Shock lingered, not loud enough to be cathartic. The resident stood near the desk, sleeves rolled up, eyes red, speaking quickly to administration. "It escalated faster than expected," he said. "We followed protocol as best we could." Someone nodded. Someone else wrote it down. Nora stood a few feet away, charting. Her shoulder throbbed dully beneath the sleeve of her scrubs. She adjusted her posture to keep it from showing. No one asked her to speak. She didn't offer. The narrative took shape without her. Words like confusion, unexpected violence, outside interference. Responsibility blurred. Blame softened and spread thin. Nora let it. She had learned long ago that arguing over stories never saved lives. A man approached her while she finished her notes. Mid-50s. Grey hair. A medic's posture worn smooth by years of carrying weight that didn't belong to him. He didn't introduce himself. "Walk with me," he said quietly. She followed him down the corridor toward the empty supply alcove, away from ears, away from cameras. He stopped there, hands in his pockets. "You did good work tonight," he said. Nora nodded once, not in agreement, just acknowledgement. He studied her for a moment. "You kept people alive who shouldn't have made it through that." She closed the chart. "Did he live?" The man smiled faintly. "Yes." Something in Nora's chest loosened, just enough to notice. "That's all I needed to know," she said. He reached into his jacket and handed her a folded piece of paper. She didn't open it. "Your name won't be on any report," he said. "That wasn't an accident." Nora met his eyes. "Thank you." He hesitated. "If you ever—" "I won't," she replied gently. He nodded, understanding more than he said, then stepped away. Nora returned to the floor. A child cried softly in bed 3. Minor laceration, shaken, nothing life-threatening. Nora cleaned her hands, checked the chart, and approached with the same calm she had used all night. "It's going to sting," she said. "Then it will stop." The child nodded, watching her face. Nora counted softly under her breath as she worked. The tremor in her hands returned when she was being watched. She let it. The child didn't notice. When she finished, she smoothed the blanket and stepped back. "Thank you," the child's mother whispered. Nora inclined her head and moved on. At the nurse's station, her badge sat where she had left it. Someone had adjusted it, straightened the label. No note, no explanation. Just correct. She changed in the locker room as the sun rose fully outside. The mirror showed bruising at her collarbone, faint and dark. She covered it with clean clothes, methodical and quiet. Before leaving, she reached into her pocket and felt the small weight there. A coin. Plain. Worn smooth. She turned it once between her fingers, then tucked it away. The hallway hummed as it always did in the early morning. Machines waking, carts rolling, the world resetting. Nora walked it alone, shoulders relaxed, eyes forward, invisible again. Not because she had to be, but because she chose to be. And this time the quiet didn't feel like weakness.